Hey guys, it's Jolene from Smith's Nature Friendly Farms. We are hanging out outside today where it's a bit cool and we're learning some tougher lessons today. Alright guys, with the temperatures cooling off in the last couple of weeks, we have had some learnings. Good news is learnings are fantastic. Gardening is one giant test and learn project, and I fail a lot at gardening, so that's great for me because failing usually means that in the process I'm learning something, usually. So one of the things that I've talked about in previous videos is how I heat my greenhouse, and I have used these guys to heat my greenhouse. So I use a string of old style Christmas lights. These are not an LED Christmas light. These are like the Christmas lights that your parents probably had on their house. Hard to get now. You can still get bulbs, but I haven't been able to find strings. And the downside of them is that the moisture gets into the bulbs and then eventually fries the string, which is what happened to me. So this year I had to experiment with heat lamps, and I thought I would share with you the results. All right, so we're in the greenhouse, and I gotta say, it's not overly warm in here, so I'm a little bit nervous about tonight. It'll be interesting to watch. I might be running out at 3 a.m. with an extra heat lamp to try and save plants. We shall see. All I have right now is one heat lamp and a string of Christmas lights, and these aren't overly hot Christmas lights. So I'm now relying on one single heat lamp. Okay, so I chickened out and added another heat lamp. It's like I've got a couple of like special trees in here and I don't want them to go. So we've got one heat lamp, two heat lamps, and a string of Christmas lights. One brave chicken out in the ice rain. Come on, let's go to bed. Come on. Come on. Hurry up. Good girl. So with our first freeze, we reached -4 Celsius and 25 degrees Fahrenheit. The greenhouse did relatively well in that freeze. The rule that exists is that if you have a greenhouse, it tends to be about 5 degrees warmer than the outside, and that seemed to reign true with our greenhouse. We seemed to remain above freezing levels, and it stayed just warm enough to keep everything okay. But on to the next freeze. All right, so you can see in the greenhouse I still have one string of lights. Now this is a newer style set of lights and not putting off the same amount of heat that the older style are. But what I actually added this year was 1, 2, and 3 heat lamps. And you can see here that we're using extra blankets to kind of create this extra layer, like this microclimate underneath. That makes a difference as well. So the temperatures got down to -6 Celsius, which is about 21 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not the worst I've seen it here. We actually last year got a bit lower than that, I think down into the 18s, -8 range Celsius. And this year it's only been -6, and I actually did worse than I did with the Christmas lights last year. I lost a lot of plants. I'm going to show you a couple of things. Obviously I lost the plants that are not hardy, but you know, that was the whole point of having the heat lamps in the greenhouse, was hopefully to keep them alive. But here's your spoiler alert, the heat lamps did not work very well at keeping the temperatures in the greenhouse. Now, important to note, I have a very important rule, and I'd really strongly stand by this rule. Until you have a true tested heating system that you know 100% will hold the temperature, I do not put plants in my greenhouse that I would be devastated to lose, including flats of all my seedlings. So I've got about 1,000 seedlings sitting in the house. My husband loves the living room at this time of year. Or prized plants, they all come inside. Until I've had a system that I know 100% I feel confident that we will not have a loss, they stay in the house. Now I do these things and put some of these plants in here that you're about to see as kind of like the canary in the cave thing. So they're out here to test this method, and I'm here to share this method. Spoiler alert, did not work. So let's take a look. So this is one of my tropical plants. I'm not overly a huge fan of tropical plants. I inherit them along the way. Yes, I've committed plant murder again. But tropical plants are high maintenance, require a lot of water, and there's no native value to them. So woo-woo, not so sad. But this is my tomato plant. I am actually kind of sad about it. It was going along so well. It was full of blooms, and it absolutely has been destroyed. Which last year with the Christmas lights, my tomato plants and pepper plants survived just fine. Lemon trees and all that, they did great. All my citrus are just fine. There's some brassicas in the back. They're just fine. Any of the tomato plants look a bit burnt. These aloe vera, despite the fact that they're looking a bit brown, I actually think that's more from the change of more sunlight. They used to be in a darker spot and now they're getting more sunlight. They seem to have survived. I'm actually impressed with the hardiness of these aloe vera plants. I wouldn't have stored them outside, but they certainly seem to do just fine because these guys actually were not covered. And everybody down here did fine. This guy took a hit. I'm hoping I don't even know what it is, but it's for my porch, so I'm hoping it comes back to life. Goji berries did just fine. I'm actually not even 100% sure they need to be in here. They are actually quite hardy, so I'm not overly surprised, but they did just fine. There is a tomato plant that was fully covered that did actually survive. I don't know how well he's going to do, but you know, maybe he may keep going. And so the additional aspect of covering does help a lot. And if you had a really good system for making sure they're totally covered, like some of these are probably dying because I can't get the coverage due to the fact that my greenhouse is far too full. Again, bad on my side, but these guys are probably dying because they're not fully covered properly. The pineapple plant was covered. The pepper in behind it, you can see, got bit quite a bit. Likely won't make it, but the pineapple plant should make it, despite the fact it did definitely get injured in the process, but core-wise, it's probably just fine. But that's one I would be sad to lose because it's a couple of years in the making. It's probably a 2-year-old plant, and on the 3rd year approximately, I should start to see a pineapple. So I would hate to lose it now after 2 years. There is a tomato also in here. Looks like he's still okay too. So some things, again, if they're covered, seem to be okay. These guys, you can see, tropical plant, terrible shape. It was actually covered, but it just couldn't take it. So plants like rosemary, super hardy. I wasn't overly worried. I don't even think they have to be in there. In fact, they don't, because I have a couple outside and they seem to make it. The bay leaf laurel plant in the back did just fine. It's another one that doesn't necessarily have to be in here. So all in all, my final judgment, I guess, of a heat lamp, 3 of them, and a set of Christmas lights in the greenhouse are not sufficient to keep any treasured tropical natured plants warm enough. So if you're thinking about just putting in some heat lamps, I would encourage you to think that through, maybe with something different. Definitely some more heat, and or definitely be very good at double covering and creating that second layer of cloth around your plants. That might make just the difference. So that was for temperatures that went as low as -6 Celsius and 21 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything below that, absolutely, like those heat lamps obviously could not have kept up. In between that, I might have had a bit of better success, but that seems to be a temperature where I lost all the tropicals in this greenhouse. So the other option could be is if you have a better greenhouse material, maybe you have a double wrapped greenhouse. I do find this greenhouse seems to not hold the heat quite as good as my previous ones, but that might just be the lack of light from the Christmas lights or not, something like that, or lack of heat. So in general, I'll have to go back to the drawing board on this one. These heat lamps are not going to cut it, and we're going to have to keep my poor husband and plants in the living room. All right, guys, that's it. Be friendly, be kind.